So my buddy Gene Ching, you might know him from Kung Fu Magazine, Kung Fu Tai Chi Magazine, or the talk that we had here is The Kind Side of Not Fighting Fair. He sent me this email the other day saying, you got to meet my buddy Gary. We're now publishing his book, Spotting Danger Before It Spots You. Gary is a retired air marshal, and he's amazing at communicating and teaching situational awareness. I sent Gary my course. He sent me his book. We've been kind of jamming back and forth. And then come to find out, Gary has spent a lot of time in Beckley, West Virginia, which is where a lot of my family is from. He's up in North Carolina or Virginia right now. And this guy was just super fun to talk to. Actually, I could talk to him for days straight. So we got to talk music, the big three, and then situational awareness. I hope you guys enjoy this talk. Remember, go on the site. So if you want to download this talk, you can do it on the site. Just click on the package. It's free, and there's an audio download on there. Just requires your email, or just watch it on YouTube. And thank you to Gary Quesenberry for this talk. I had a great time. I'm loving this work because it's introducing me to some very like-minded people, and I just leave inspired for the rest of the day. So this is Total BS Wellness. If you don't show up, engage, and practice, it's all BS. It's good to see your face, man.
Yeah,
You're officially also in your dark cinematic room of your home.
Oh, yeah. No cinematic stuff in here, though. I don't even have a radio in here.
Our civilian mind, there's so many times where we're trying to become tactical, or we're trying to become we're trying to sort of utilize the same tools as a law enforcement person, and we don't have the same rights, and our responsibilities are different.
Sure.
So that's where, let's start there.
Okay. Sounds fantastic.
All right, introduce yourself, please.
All right. My name's Gary Quesenberry. Like you said, I was an air marshal for 18 years. So right after 9/11, I dropped my application. It was in the beginning of October, right after they started taking applications for the Air Marshal Service.
Yeah.
I heard from them relatively quickly, and it took me a while to get through the entire physical process for getting hired because I'm colorblind. So I had to jump through a lot of hoops on that. But finally got the job and started in my first field office, which was Las Vegas, Nevada, in March of 2002. And I was doing that job. I've moved around quite a bit, different field offices, different jobs within the Federal Air Marshal Service. But I finally landed in the Philadelphia field office and retired from there in October. So now I'm back home in Virginia.
I feel like I let myself down by not even considering air marshals when I was doing all this situational awareness, because not only is it your job to do you guys study a lot of situational awareness? Because I just imagine that is like your biggest tool.
So, when we first started out in the job, we didn't realize the important role that situational awareness was going to play. We had a couple of classes here and there, like I said, but you try to balance that job. We went in all gung-ho, like we're here to fight terrorism and, stop the next 9/11. But then once the kind of the reality of the situation set in, these guys plan these attacks for years. So we sat there for a long time with nothing happening. But, we still had to blend in. We had to blend in. We had to stay alert. We had to be aware of what was going on around us. When everybody else on the plane on international missions crashed, we were just kind of there doing our thing. Yeah. But, and it's something that, you learn to develop over a period of time. It's not something that you can sit down for an 8-hour class in Artesia, New Mexico and grasp the entirety of situational awareness and the role it's going to play in your life moving forward. And, what I always found was that applied to much more than the job of a federal air marshal. That's something that I learned to apply in my, everyday life as well, especially once I started having kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going through this. I wrote a lot of literature for my situational mindfulness course, and one of the things that I was writing about, and I noticed in your book. So, what's the name of your book? Your first book?
The first book is Spotting Danger Before It Spots You, and that's it right there. It's just it's the basics, the nuts and bolts of situational awareness.
Yeah.
And it's written not for military law enforcement types. It's written for everyday folks, that just want to kind of improve their awareness. Because all too often people have this misconception in their mind that, like that scene from the Jason Bourne movies where he's sitting in the diner and he's memorized all the license plates and how much the guy at the counter weighs and his waitress is left-handed, those things. You can get there, you can do that, but for the average person, just being able to understand what's going on around you and pick up on those little, what we call baseline anomalies, and interpret what that means for your safety. That's what you need to know.
The other thing that I don't think we consider too is this is what I'm always telling people, and this is what I connected with you when because I'm reading your book. I read your book, and it's funny because like I love that, because I go through that same thing as you. You need to understand baselines and anomalies and whatever, but we also need to realize that if you're walking through life sizing everyone up all the time, you're going to get exhausted because there's a lot more people than you. Like you can control you. Our job isn't to enforce something or isn't to, it's like we're not out there doing that. You're not a bouncer. You're not a law enforcement. Most of the time we're not.
Right.
And you're just going to be weird. Like you're actually going to be the anomaly if you're always like, You're Absolutely. The anomaly.
Yeah, you're the one that's going to stand out, and people are going to start watching you. Yeah. And that's the one thing a lot of guys had to learn when they came onto the job as an air marshal is stop trying to be that secret agent. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's out there trying to save the world. That's, and you'd see people who did, like watch every person so intently that 2 hours into the flight, people start nodding off because they've exhausted themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's easy to do. People don't realize what a toll that can take on you if you try to live in that bubble, that awareness bubble all the time.
Yeah.
And that's why, when we talk about like the levels of awareness, it's that relaxed state of awareness that you always want to keep yourself in so that you're not completely stressing yourself out. You can walk into a room and what's right and wrong, kind of right off the bat. You know how people in a grocery store are supposed to act. You know how people at a concert are supposed to act. It's when people act outside those norms that we've kind of established in our mind that it raises our attention. And those are the things that you have to dial in on. So if you learn to do that, it makes your life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it's congruencies and incongruencies. It's like, one of the things that I was writing a long time ago of how, and you mentioned this too, you don't want to be a fear monger, right? Because it's funny how by studying this, people think, well, I don't want to look at the world in that way. You're like, actually, when you study this, you don't look at the world in that way. It's kind of like how it's really hard to get a fighter to fight you just because they understand fighting. It's really funny how that there's one of my favorite questions that I did this talk with these guys on presenting and storytelling and stuff like that. And one of the really amazing questions is, you may think, but really. Right. And you kind of answered that in your book of like, you may think it's this tactical and blah, 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 but really it's, you're mindful of yourself and your surroundings.
Sure. Yeah. It comes in handy a lot more often than you would think. Like, if you're raising children, my second book, the one that's coming out in June, it's for parents who want to teach their younger children about situational awareness. But as a parent, you need that situational awareness in the confines of your own home, because when your kids are acting weird, when they're up to something, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Those kind of things are what really helps families, to be close together, to be able to learn from each other, to teach one another and keep each other safe. And that's kind of what this series of books, it's what it's all leading towards. Like I said, the first book is kind of that nuts and bolts piece of situational awareness. But then after that, we're talking about how to kind of keep your family tight and on the same sheet of music when it comes to watching each other's back, knowing what to look for and keeping everybody alert on their toes. And, it just makes for a much stronger bond in my experience.
What do you think about, and we talked about this when we first talked, this whole idea of advocacy, because that's what you're talking about, watching each other's backs and, kind of having the crew around you that can, again, not always vigilant, but just sort of noticing when things are changing. I think that's lacking right now, because so many times you'll see like one person about ready to, take a header down the stairs while everyone else is. I say it used to be freeze, flight, or fight, but now it's film, flail, and fail.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's
that's kind of
perfect.
yeah. And I mean, how do you go about, like, with air marshals and even with yourself, about creating that kind of lookout for each other?
Well, it happens in stages. And the one thing that I've noticed just in the process of writing these books is I'm writing the ones right now, Spotting Danger Before It Spots Your Teen. That's going to be book 3 in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize as I'm writing this, because I've raised, my wife and I, we've got 3 kids. They're all adults now. They're all 3 out, doing their thing in the world. But, I realize from help, raising teenagers that if you don't start building that foundation for situational awareness early when they're young, this information is going to be a whole lot harder to present to them.
Mm-hmm.
Just to say, hey, look, I want to talk to you about situational awareness. All you're going to get is a bunch of eye rolls. And, okay, Dad, whatever.
Yeah.
Been watching too many, Tom Cruise movies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can start your children young on it and teach them the reason for the importance, then it's a lot easier to get past that when they're older, because the only way to get through to them when they're older is when something bad actually happens. That's what gains their attention. And then they're like, okay, what should I have done, to prevent this? And you don't ever want to see your child in that predicament. So, hopefully my goal is through these books to answer some of those questions for parents, caregivers, or, whoever has children, uncles, aunts, whoever has children in their life that they care about, to kind of help them get through these things and keep them aware of their surroundings so that they're less likely to be targeted by predators.
Right. There's one of the things, the first thing that I tell people all the time when it comes to awareness is it's upstream versus downstream thinking. And it's funny how many times we'll think upstream, like changing the oil in our car, or, there's the eating your vegetables and all these other things. But I find, like, the challenge is the way that our marketing works is we actually, it says find a problem, create a solution, and then create, but the thing about but the thing about situational awareness is, with situational awareness, there should be technically no problem. It's kind of like, it's easy to identify why you need an air marshal during a hijacking.
Sure.
Right. But it's hard to identify. But you can't prove that that if that person was there, that's the reason why there wasn't a hijacking. You can prove that eating vegetables is good for you, but you can't prove that's why you don't have cancer right now. Right. But you can prove that you need the doctor when you have cancer. Right. You can prove that. And so it's kind of an interesting thing of I mean, what are your challenges? Because this has been my biggest challenge, is putting that energy out there of just being like, you need insurance, you need to change the oil in your car, but this is that of your safety, of your health, of your wealth, of your joy, of your relaxation. Like, and what have been your challenges of kind of selling this?
Well, I think unfortunately a lot of people have the, that'll never happen to me kind of mindset.
Yeah. Or I know.
Yeah.
Everyone knows.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you see that all the time. Like, I used to be a firearms instructor, and, you teach these classes, and, you're working with, just for instance, you're working with a female and you're trying to teach her that her grip is wrong and how she needs to correct that to make herself more accurate. Yeah. And the first thing you get is like, I totally know what I'm doing wrong. My boyfriend's a cop and he's a firearms instructor. Well, maybe your boyfriend's messed up. Maybe he's the one that's teaching you this, this technique that's wrong. So, with children, I think it's important that, you kind of guide them into this a little more easily.
Yeah.
And, teenagers especially, they have a really tough time. Kids in general, they have a really tough time. So they're going to see, take bullying, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So, kids get bullied, they learn to develop that awareness, and they know that, okay, I know where this guy's going to be at this time, so I need to go this way to avoid this situation altogether. And my big struggle with writing these books has been able to take little things like that and tie it into a bigger picture.
Yeah.
It's not just the bully that you have to worry about. It's online predators. It's these predator types who are looking to exploit teenagers and sell them into the sex trade. That seems a little horrific. And like I said, I try not to, teach through fear, but these are just things that happen in the world that you need to be aware of. So, that's the biggest challenge, is trying to balance that, that this is what you need to know without completely trying to terrify somebody. Unfortunately,
sorry, go on.
No, for me and my family, yeah, and I tell this story in the book, but I got my job as a federal air marshal, and I'm completely trained. I'm young. I'm gung ho. I'm ready to do my job, but I became what I called a 9-to-5er. So I'd show up to work. I got my gun. I got my badge. I got all this training. I'm ready to go. And then when I get back from my mission, wherever that may be, on my way home, I would just kind of shut down and stop worrying about my surroundings. And I stopped worrying about what could possibly go wrong. And in that first year of me doing my job, at some point when I was off duty, someone got to me, you know what I mean? And they had all my information. And at one point they contacted my children's school. I had 2 kids who were elementary school students at the time. And they identified themselves as Gary Quesenberry. They told the school administrator that they worked as a federal air marshal. They were getting transferred to another field office, and he would be there early that day to pick them up. So have them in the attendance office with all their stuff. He'd be there to get them. Well, I'm in Baltimore that night. I'm stationed in Las Vegas. This is all happening in Las Vegas, but I'm in Baltimore. Luckily, my wife volunteered at the school quite often, helping teachers just make copies and things like that. So she showed up early that day with my youngest daughter. And when she showed up, the counselor that was in the office said, hey, we're real sorry to hear that Josh and Elda aren't going to be in school anymore. They're waiting, for your husband. And my wife's trying to make sense out of all this. Like, she knows I'm in Baltimore. She knows I'm out working, and she knows that we're not moving. So anyway, long story short, we don't know who it was. We never figured out who it was. There's no other parents involved. Like, these are our children. There's no step parents, because a lot of times, that kind of thing happens. But, the FBI got involved. Local law enforcement got involved. There was a big police presence with some of my co-workers and supervisors from the field office there in Las Vegas that showed up. And I think that added presence that day, whoever it was, kind of scared them off.
Yeah.
And nobody ever showed up. And it never happened again. But, I like to think that we raised our children to know that if someone comes to pick you up from school and it's not mom or dad, there's a problem. I don't know how they would have reacted to that. And I thank God that they didn't have to, be tested under those circumstances. But for me, it was a little bit easier getting buy-in from my children, because they were old enough to realize, with all the cops around and people at the house asking questions, and, me getting pulled off of my schedule and flown directly back to Las Vegas, all this stuff, they knew something was wrong. Their baseline changed dramatically, and they felt that.
Yeah.
So it was a lot easier moving forward with them to get buy-in on the situational awareness piece. They saw at an early age how important that was. So
wow, that's not only terrifying, but it's something that I shared. I had 2 students, young people. They're like 10 and 12 right now, and their mom actually took them through the situational awareness course that I was doing. And I'm always getting on them about, when people walk in the room, you look down at your phone as opposed to like wave, say hi, like introduce. I mean, you're in your martial arts school. You should be, manners are important, right? Because if you don't have manners, I don't care if you lose a tooth, right? So there's that thing. But then someone was following them home, and they live in a pretty rough neighborhood. But the mom was just kind of driving, and they're doing their thing, and then the kids were like, that person's following us. And so they made a couple turns, and and then next thing you know, they're like, oh my God, and so they called me when they, they kind of drove around, and then, kind of went to a well-lit area, and all this other stuff. But then the person just stopped following them. But then they came they called me after that, and I was like, the course just paid for itself.
Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean? Like all it need, and that's the whole thing about, when you don't change your oil, you're like, I don't have time. But like when your car is on fire, like it's not just a quick oil change after that.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I mean? And not only that, but the fun part is your whole baseline changes, right? You know now the importance of it, but you don't want something, I guess, for lack of a better term, like it's better to study this stuff when you're young. Like I always say, getting punched in the face when you're 3 is totally different than getting punched in the face when you're 30.
Yeah, it is.
It's totally different.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because situational awareness is, it works that way. Like I tell people all the time, real self-defense isn't about being able to throw a punch or take a punch.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
about being able to see what's coming, because you give yourself the amount of time and space you need to react to that situation. Where if you're caught off guard, you're missing that piece. You're missing that time and space. So, it is a lot different, and
Yeah.
understanding that and how it applies to your everyday life, not just in terms of being in a fight, it can really change the way you live.
So you brought up something really interesting, which was when you were off work. So this goes back to the mindfulness training of this. So I remember the difference in breaking up a fight when I was working security or as a bouncer versus when I'm not and I have to break up a fight, right? It's totally different. Um, and same thing with you can I could see it with an air marshal or someone. Like you've been on all day, you're off work, and when you put on this uniform and this thing, it's kind of like when I'm in the dojo, I'm not surprised by people punching at me. But when I leave the dojo, you can knock me out in a second. It's like, it's kind of, I'm not on anymore. And that's it's a real interesting thing of like, I'm good at falling. I've been falling since I started judo when I was a little kid, like in, kindergarten. But out there it's different because the fall surprises you and you weren't wearing your falling clothes, right?
Right.
And that's the clustering of situational awareness. Like, where are you? What are you doing? And that's when the stuff gets you. Is like, can you identify that? What is a safe place? Can you identify? Should I be relaxed, alert, or should I be complete? Am I safe to turn off now, or am I safe to turn? Kind of things like that.
Yeah.
And after that time, did it change the way that you're kind of viewing the world after you took off your uniform and you were unaware? Did it change the way you are now?
Well, it did change. And,
Okay.
like I said, it changed for the worse until that event with my kids happened at their
Mm-hmm.
school. And then I
Yeah.
realized that, okay, so I've got to give this a lot more thought.
Right.
So instead of being hyper vigilant at work and then shutting off completely once I got home,
Mm-hmm.
we talk about, the Cooper's colors,
Yeah.
situational awareness, and
Yeah.
condition white is basically reserved for when you're asleep, right? You can
Yeah.
completely shut yourself down and not have to be so hyper vigilant.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was doing. After work, I was kind of slipping into condition white, being hyper vigilant at work, and then the
Yeah.
exact opposite at home. So, that really led me into a pretty deep dive on situational awareness and how best to find that balance, like we talked about, that relaxed, alert state,
Yeah.
that we want to stay in. In the Cooper's color system, it's condition yellow. But once I learned to keep myself in that condition, and what identifies baselines, and what represents a baseline anomaly, and when my attention needs to fluctuate between relaxed alert and kind of high alert,
Yeah.
that's when my life became a whole lot easier, because then I had that awareness all the time, as opposed to just, you know, way up here while I'm on the plane, and then way down here where, quite frankly, it was dangerous to live that way. Because, as a federal air marshal, once they ramped the service up in the very beginning, there were a lot of guys getting targeted, and we don't know about who or why, but, a few guys got the like ransom packages and stuff. Uh,
Yeah.
Delivered to their houses, the issue with me and my children at their school, suspicious packages and stuff like this. There were a lot of like tests. We feel that they were tests, to try to fill us out and see how we'd react to various situations. And we don't know who were conducting those tests, but, that learning to live in that relaxed, alert state kept me sane, because I was able to spot things that were potentially dangerous at home, when I was, out at the mall with my kids, or whether I was 30,000 feet in the air. That never changed. It just stayed the same. And, it kind of took a lot of pressure off my shoulders, because I felt like I could let my guard down a little bit here and there. I knew when and I knew how, but it took a
Yeah.
long time for me to kind of strike that balance in my life.
That reminds me, I tell people you should learn this stuff, because then when you're out with your friends, I call it the Matt Lucas horror movie theory. Like if we were out and there's a killer out there, and like which one of our friends is going to be the person that flies off the handle and gets us killed, or isn't aware and gets, like who in
Yeah,
this group. I don't want to be the person that is the liability, right?
right.
And and the more people you have in your crew, then next, it's kind of like when you watch the Goonies, like each one of them had their skill, you know what I mean? And it
Yeah,
made for light work. And I really always wanted to be that, it's like, it's not about gamification. It's about actually building capacity, right? And when you know that your kids, I tell kids all the time, the best gift you can give your parents is letting them know that you're safe when you're out of their sight,
yeah,
or else you're never going to have freedom. It's like you're doing it for your own freedom, but you're also doing it for their peace of mind. And
sure.
it's a great gift. I wish more young people could see that.
And that's what I'm writing about right now, in that
Mm,
third book for teens,
yeah,
because our children reach a certain age where that's all they think about is their independence.
independence. Yeah,
I can't wait to get away from here and do my own thing.
yeah,
Well, wouldn't you much rather, break away? Because parents want that. They want to see their kids go out into the world and be productive and do the right thing, and not have to live under these harsh circumstances that they can create through their own actions.
yeah,
So we talk about developing responsible independence.
hmm,
Responsible independence is, like you just said, where the parents get the relief of knowing that they've taught their children what they need to know to turn them loose and not have to look over their shoulder all the time. And then the children get that real sense of freedom that comes with knowing that they're making the right decisions based on what they learned at home. So
yeah.
that's where that bridge is. And that's the things that I'm trying to get across in these next two books, the one for younger children, and then the one for teens, because you're working with two very different types of people there.
Completely. Yeah,
Even though they're the same person in your house.
yeah,
My kid, my kids when they were 9 were the same kids they were when they were 16. But you would think that, you know like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like I don't know what happened to you when you turned 15 or 16, but you're a different person now.
yeah.
So you try to bridge that gap as best you can and turn them loose and give them the freedom they need to explore themselves, kind of really find out who they are, but do it in a way that's going to keep them out of trouble and safe.
I remember, the good old fashioned. Yeah, I hated my parents. Good old fashioned. Like I'm just became a teenager, and your parents are up there with. I always say there is the concept of the man, and it's whatever can tell you what to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so my parents and the government, no bueno. And I remember going away because I wanted to be a rock star, straight up. Like that's what I wanted to be. And so I was like probably 13 or 14, and I wasn't driving yet, and I flew out to California to play like a gig, and I'm at this after party. Right, I had a weird childhood. I've been on my own for we had a lot of freedom as kids, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm out there, and we're Southern too, so I could just leave on a Friday on my motorcycle and be like, "See you Sunday," and they'd be like, "Okay." But so I go out, and I'm at this after party, and I was looking at this old jazz kind of legend playing the piano, and he's like snarling, and I was just sitting. I was getting into jazz music at this time, and he was just a dark, ruthless, like 70-year-old man just shredding that piano, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I was just glued to him. I was probably on his knee almost. I was so close to this guy. And then at the
Yeah.
end of it, I was the anomaly in the room. Like, why is there a kid at this after party, right? So he starts talking to me, and he's like, where's your parents, And I was like, oh, fuck my parents, It's kind of like one of those.
Yeah.
I was like, screw my parents. Who cares, I was like, um, and uh, and he's like, you need to watch your tone. And he's like, you have good parents. And I was like, nah, man, they're always, strict and, you know, they told me what to do once and now I'm mad. You know what I mean?
Right.
My parents weren't that strict. And he goes, I don't know any kid your age that could come across the country and hang out and be cool in an environment full of adults and talk to people and hold their own. He's like, you got good parents. He goes, if your parents are good, you can leave. He goes, that's what good parents do. He's like,
Yeah.
and he goes, so you need to change your tune. He was like real, like, you know, old black guy, just like, boy, you need to like recognize.
Yeah.
And ever since then, all my anger, all my, like, everything went away because I was like, oh yeah, like, I am in another state playing music, and it's because, you know, of these skills that they taught me. So yeah, stoked. But it takes a while.
Yeah. And, you know, we have the benefit, you know, as we get older, we have the benefit of hindsight. So what you're feeling as a teenager, you don't realize until much later. It's funny. My oldest daughter's in the Air Force, and a few weeks ago, we took a bunch of stuff to her in a U-Haul, you know, her bed and things, because she got her apartment. Yeah. And we were sitting down talking one night, and she's talking about all the stuff she's got to do, you know, for work, because she works for some 4-star generals, like some really higher ups, and they have very high expectations, and they have very strict rules for how things should be done. And she thought that we were strict, you know. So now it's like, Dad, I would give anything to come home and have you ground me, like just so I can sit in my room and listen to music and not have to worry about anything, you know.
Yeah.
Well, but at the time, you know, it's funny because we were unpacking one of her boxes, and she found this journal. She journaled for all of like a day, and it's when she was mad at my wife and I. So she's letting us have it because we grounded her for some bad grades or something. You know, and we call it a big book because she was just complaining so hard in this little journal. But you know, she kept that, and she keeps it, you know, right there at her little nightstand so she can read it and realize exactly how good she had it. You know, so you know, it's you, like I said, you try to give them as much freedom as you can, but at the same time, you're the parent. You're the one that's ultimately responsible for their safety. So whether they know it or not, in most cases, parents are doing the things they feel like they need to do to protect that child. So,
okay, so this takes me back to that moment that you had with the person holding the gun, right? And you know, you're going to change their grip.
Yeah.
So if we understand situational awareness and that, you know, what I call the mindfulness practice of it, this person would understand that maybe, like, it's rarely a good idea to teach the person you're having sex with. So due to the nature and the baseline of their relationship, like, we don't know if, you know, are they emotional? Were they arguing? Like, it's hard to teach your lover. So
sure.
At that point, you know, this is a thing. You have to be very, very disciplined to be taught by the person that you're in a relationship with. So, and you can already tell if they're like, I know, then that's the first sign of not having discipline. Like, that's, you know, it's justifications. And if we had a little bit of mindfulness around that, I'd be like, all right, my boyfriend or my girlfriend or whoever is teaching me, my partner is teaching me. We just have to know that we have another relationship where they actually don't have to follow your orders, because then, you know what I mean? We have to be able to put down that script and move into another script. And, you know, I've seen it. Some people, it works. You know, martial artists all the time, you know, are dating each other and they train. But it takes a while. And it takes a lot of focus and a lot of discipline to be able to put down those scripts that we have with those people and start a new one, you know? Sure. So, yeah, man, that's a tough one whenever.
It is. Yeah. You think about trying to teach your children about situational awareness. Like you said, you're in a relationship with that child. You're trying to do one thing, they're trying to do something else. Everybody has the same goal in mind when you look at the big picture, to raise a productive, responsible adult and turn them loose in the world. You know, that's the end goal. But in the moment, you know, when you're teaching these little the minutia of things, you know, like how to be responsible and how to, you know, be, you know, accountable for your own safety. Those are the things where it can be difficult to get your point across without seeming, I don't know, you know, overly harsh.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, like you were talking about earlier, like the Goonies, right? Like the teamwork piece. It's the same way inside a family. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses, and you got to learn to pull together to kind of help each other out. And I'm writing a section in that book 3 where it talks about putting together that team to make the entire family unit stronger. And it was funny because after that incident with my children at their school, we started talking a lot about situational awareness and what that means. And what do you do if this happens? And what do you do if that happens? And things like surveillance detection routes and stuff like that to verify if you feel like you're being followed.
Yeah.
And this stuff that stuck with my kids for the rest of their lives. And it's come in handy. And every time they do something where they remember, one of the lessons that we taught, they'll call and be like, "Hey, Dad, you won't believe what just happened."
Yeah.
It's rewarding to get that feedback. But like I said, in the moment when your kids are young and you're trying to get this across to them, it's difficult. So hopefully we'll help ease some of that. You know what I mean? Like I said, I have the benefit of hindsight. So I can look back on it and say, okay, these are the obstacles that I faced when I was teaching my kids about these things. And I had a job where I completely understood the importance of it. But trying to get that through to a teenager, to somebody who's 9 or 10 years old, it's a little more difficult. So it happens in stages. And, it's not like you're just going to set your 14-year-old kid down and say, all right, we're going to have an 8-hour block on situational awareness and it's going to change your life. That's not how that works. Right. So you gotta find strengths and weaknesses within the entire family and then learn how to have each other work together so that you can make that strong, aware family unit. And they'll take those lessons with them when they do walk out the door.
Yeah, there's the monks, they always say if you can't walk with it, it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
So we can be aware at work, we can be aware at this, but if you can't take it into your, if you can't take that piece from the mat into your life, you're not peaceful yet, right? You need too many things. And it's not about building the skill, it's like knowing when to use it, right? Like music is these 12 notes. Every song was written with these 12 notes, but like when the song's going and they just go, ladies and gentlemen, and then you like, what notes do you play right now? And with young people, it's about understanding if you have that mindful practice of knowing where your stresses are. So you might be the greatest, you might be super aware, but then all of a sudden when the person that you have a crush on walks in the room, now you're just like self-conscious again, right? And it's literally, are you aware that you just became self-conscious? Are you... you might be really good at solving a puzzle in front of people, but are you good at solving puzzle with a timer on? Right? There's, it's like, what are the different stresses that we can integrate to actually integrate the skill? And it's very interesting to watch that because, I've been super good at something and all of a sudden, stunt guys, it's like that. Like they're really good at doing stunts in their gym around their friends, but now you're in a room full of strangers and the floor is wet and you're wearing some weird armor and you have eyeliner on and and it's 3, 2, 1, do it. Yeah. And then you have to integrate with someone that you haven't been training with your whole life. You just have to walk into a room and do it. And that's a million times harder. So instead of doing a double backflip, you might just like do just a fall because that's what you can do under any situation. And it looks great no matter, rain, sleet, snow, it doesn't matter. You can do that. But the crazy double backflip, you might need a series of events to make sure that you're comfortable, safe, release the stress. I don't think we acknowledge all of those. I learned it as clusters, right? But all these clusters play a part of, what's going on. Mm-hmm. And, to be aware of that is like, there's your whole life's practice.
Right.
That's your whole life. It's crazy.
Yeah. We ran into that a lot. You talk about being good at something under certain conditions and then falling apart elsewhere. When I worked for a few years as the lead firearms instructor for the Federal Air Marshal Service. So we're training new air marshals coming into the academy. Mm-hmm. And, every now and then you get a phone call, you get a heads up from somebody in the field office like, hey, you're about to get this kid and he's a phenomenal shooter. Because that's what we do. That's what we're kind of known for. Yeah. Federal Air Marshal Service. We have the highest firearm standards of any other federal agency. So we pride ourselves on that marksmanship. Yeah. And you get a phone call saying, hey, you're about to get this guy. He's a phenomenal shot. he's gonna blow you away with how good he can shoot. So you get him out on the range, and we start off. We have X amount of sessions that we work with, with these kids, and I say kids, they're all in their 20s. They're adults, and most of them served overseas on multiple deployments. So I don't mean that to be derogatory when I say but
I get it.
You'll see them on the range when we're doing these basic drills and just the marksmanship stuff. And they're just punching holes dead in the center of the paper. But then we add the timer, and then it's the timer plus the moving targets.
Yeah.
And then we keep compressing the times and adding more stress. And then you see them falling apart. And it's no different when you're talking to your children about situational awareness. You can't feed them this amount of information it's like drinking through a fire hose. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And when you see them start to lose focus or fall apart, like we did with these people on the firearms range, that's when you have to stop, back it up a little bit, and go from where they started falling apart and build on those skills, and then start incrementally adding more stressors to make it more difficult. And you'll see that progress. It's like, rungs on a ladder. I don't get to the top of the ladder, from that bottom rung. I've got all these little incremental steps that I have to go through. And that works whether it's martial arts, firearms training in the Federal Air Marshal Service, or teaching your 8-year-old kid about situational awareness. It has to happen in phases, and you have to add those little stressors to see where they fall apart.
The thing about awareness too is it's so simple. Like I'm around people all the time where they're this is why I like boxing. It's just these kind of 5 punches and just move, right?
Yeah.
It's and that's why it's so kind of beautiful, because it is. And it's like basketball. You're just kind of dribble, pass, shoot, kind of thing. It's like and then all of that is sort of in that bubble. And so therefore, with the kids, I have this rule that, we go through all the levels. Like, what's the goal? Can you do the goal? Can you do it consistently? Now, add stress. Can you do it? And we want to get to, can you do it consistently under stress? And then once that's done, then we say, find new stresses. And then how do we make it easier? Because want to, because then you have to sustain it in that relaxed place.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
That's the process, man. That's the process for everything.
Mm-hmm. That's what kills me sometimes about athletes when, like one of the buzzwords, it's I always goof off with people. It's like, so what you been doing? And I always just say, you just been going hard, because I feel like people are, when shelter in place happened, I don't think we understand that a lot of our lives we're trying to please our coaches and parents. So then when shelter in place went in, it put people in a position of now it's just about you.
Yeah.
And you're not getting a high five. And so people are posting on the internet and all this other stuff. I worked out today, going hard. Yeah. It's like they just need someone to say, you're doing great, buddy. Attaboy.
Somebody hit the like button on that, because I need it.
I need this. And that's really hard, because at the end of a thing, that's where the self-discipline comes in, is can you play the song without needing the applause? Can you train without, you're just building a capacity and a container. And that capacity vibrates, so when you do walk through the world, the predators aren't looking at you. They're looking at you more as like, oh, that guy's right on, attaboy from across the street, right?
Right.
I don't, and that's the investment in this work, I feel, is a big deal. But yeah, I learned the shelter in place taught me how much of our culture needs. We're trying to please some coach, and I just had a weird moment with a person in the grocery store. They were talking about, I don't do yoga unless I'm in a group, and I was like, well, you're better to yourself if you can do it alone, because right now we need people that are self-motivated and are doing good things for themselves when no one is watching.
That's the definition of integrity, right? Doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
Yeah.
And if everybody did that, if everybody only, put their best efforts forward when they thought somebody was looking at them, then we would fall apart, as a system. You have to have people that are willing to put the work in, no matter what that work is, in the absence of that, that praise, you don't need that.
Yeah.
And you see people like that on the job too. Like I'm sure it happens in law enforcement all the time. People want that recognition. They want that hero status that gets thrown around so easily. But in the Federal Air Marshal Service, like I used to tell people all the time, it's, you're just some average person. You're sitting there on the plane, you're drinking your coffee, you're reading your newspaper. You know what I mean?
You guys are the most anonymous people in the world.
You try to be, but there were people that we worked with that tried to, draw a little undue attention to themselves just because they wanted somebody to be like, oh, that dude, he's probably an air marshal,
Yeah.
We used to have a supervisor. This dude, now he was a real deal. Like he was still Team 6 sniper, Craig Sawman Sawyer. He's retired now, but he works, he's got a foundation. It's called Vets for Child Rescue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They bust up human trafficking rings, and he runs this. But he used to tell guys all the time, he's like, being a federal agent is not good cover for being a federal agent. You're a federal air marshal. You can't sit on the plane and tell somebody, well, I'm with the FBI or the CIA. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're trying to be the cool guy because, you don't want to do that. And we'd have to develop these cover stories and stuff, so that because people get chatty on planes, they want to know what you do, and it's best to keep it simple.
What was your cover story? What was your
my cover story was I looked for prices on lumber. That's what because I grew up, in Virginia, and there's a lot of log yards, and you're working in the lumber business, and there are all these factories around here, like Von Bassett Furniture, and I worked for years in a furniture factory building bedrooms.
Yeah. Okay.
And in cabinet shops, building kitchen cabinets and stuff like that. These are things I understand. And I understand how hard it is to find good wood. So I tell people all the time when I was on the plane that, I'm just flying out here to Portland because I got a guy who's going to give some good prices on lumber, and I need this stuff, sent over to Virginia. We're going to get it at a really discounted price. You start talking about lumber and you just see people like, okay. And they start reading their paper, which is what you want,
Yeah.
You don't want to be super cool and fascinating and have people start asking all these follow-on questions. Like we had guys all the time be like, I'm a stunt man. That raises way too many questions.
I will tell you this right now. If I were to sit next to you and you were talking about lumber, I would have been so into it because I've been trying to make, because there's the Persians use what's called the meal club, and in a perfect world I would manufacture them in America. And I've been looking for a way to get an 8-inch round of hardwood, which is impossible to get, by the way. And if I was to get it in America and be able to make these, I'd have to sell the clubs for $2,500 a piece because it's and so I would have just been like, oh, I'm sitting next to the gold mine here. I would have been like,
Well, and you know what? I could have spoken about this stuff. I know it. I understand it.
Yeah.
And if you want
I'm stoked right now just imagining that you're
Yeah. I've got a brother who still works in a log yard, so I can get you that wood if you need it.
Oh, weird. I see. This is because it is so hard. A situational awareness. I know how hard. And so if I see like a piece of wood that's like big and beautiful, I'm just like, wow. I mean, to me, my awareness runs. It's fascinating to me of just knowing that exists. Yeah. And and for under $800, whoa, that's crazy. Anyway, that's just I'm saying. Yeah. Okay, so all right, we're similar generation. What are some of your favorite bands?
Well, Led Zeppelin. Love Led Zeppelin.
Right. Okay.
Huge fan. Yeah. Some of my favorite bands. I love Led Zeppelin. See, I love all different kinds of music. Like me being where I'm from, I remember my granddad sitting in this old wooden chair every night at 7:30 on the local radio station, and bluegrass music played for an hour. Yeah. And he would sit there for an hour and listen to bluegrass music. So I still love bluegrass music. Mm-hmm. And right down the road here is one of the largest bluegrass festivals in the country. It happens every year, called the Fiddlers Convention in Galax, Virginia. Mm-hmm. So, I love bluegrass. I love Led Zeppelin. I love any kind of 80s rock, because I'm 50 years old. I graduated in 1988. I was in Army basic training, right when Cinderella and Guns N' Roses.
I was going to say, do you like the Cinderella Night Songs record?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, man. Cheers to you, man. I love that. That's so a sleeper. Good. People don't realize how bluesy it is because they can't see past their image. Man.
Yeah, I've got my truck, and around here, I I don't get a lot of local radio stations, so I'm
Yeah.
constantly like streaming music through my
Okay.
phone. And I've
Yeah.
got the what is it, the iHeart Radio app or something, and I
Okay.
keep it on the station is called Slippery When Wet, and it's
Oh
all
yeah.
80s rock, man. I love it. Love it.
That
But
that makes that makes sense. So through the area that you're in, all the Appalachian area and all that stuff, I have spent more time going too fast through those windy roads
yeah.
and souped up cars that shouldn't have been. My cousins, they're now, really into racing and NASCAR and all this. Actually, one of my little second cousin, he's a pro NASCAR driver. But
Oh wow.
yeah, and one of my cousins, he souped up a Pinto, of course, put Krager's on it.
Why wouldn't you?
Your Krager's a Hearst shifter, but he had a Night Rider light in the front of it.
Oh, you got to be kidding.
I mean, just straight up like West Virginia hillbilly, like. But and he could drive like no other. His nickname was Hollywood, and we would. And I remember when the Girls, Girls, Girls record came out. That album can't come on, and I don't accidentally just gun it. And so all that 80s metal or 80s rock, it's pretty. It works.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I can't. Not too long ago, my daughter, she's a linguist in the Navy, and she had graduated from the Defensive Language Institute in Monterey.
She out here at DLI,
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
Now she's on the East Coast, but she was coming home, here in Virginia, and she's got this little convertible Mustang. She didn't want to drive by herself, so my wife doesn't care much for road trips. So I'm like, I got this. So I fly out to Monterey, and we meet at my sister-in-law's house in Sacramento. And then my youngest daughter and I spent 4 days driving across the country together.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I didn't know, like, how's this going to work out? You know what I mean? Like 4 days together. We had such a blast. Like we each had these playlists put together, like a road trip playlist. Mm-hmm. We'd take turns driving. We'd stop at every weird thing we could find, this gold mine in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Ate at this in New Mexico where they filmed an episode of Breaking Bad. Like we did all this cool stuff together, but there's still in the back of my mind, music triggers certain emotions.
Yeah.
And there's these songs that come on, like Golden Earring, Radar Love. Mm-hmm. I hear that song and I think about that road trip with my daughter. It's it's good times. I love music.
Is there anything that she turned you on to that you're like, oh yeah, this is right on?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, she did. Hold on just a second.
All right.
So there's
this is important.
What's that?
I said this is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me see here. There was now this is something that she turned me on to recently, that she's like, Dad, you gotta listen to this song, you're gonna love it. And I love it. I play it all the time. It's Kesha.
Okay, yeah.
And she does a duet with Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
Because I love Dolly Parton.
That's my girl. Dolly is on my hoodie. I always have this hoodie, and on the hoodie there's an enamel pin of Dolly Parton right there. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Voice like an angel.
Oh yeah.
But it's called Old Flames. Fantastic song. So she got me into that. She got me into let me see here. She's got a lot of stuff on here that I had no clue who these people were until my daughter and I drove across country together. Mm-hmm. But I got her into some Bananarama. Cruel Summer.
Cruel Summer is magic, man.
Yeah, so awesome. But let me see here. What was it? She was. Anyway, there's a lot of songs. It's not like my kind of music. It's stuff that's catchy in the moment, and I get it stuck in my head. But for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. So
that's great.
I'm trying to dig it out, but I've got a playlist on my phone somewhere.
Yeah, it proves it's like being out there, being a writer. Writing is really important to me, and I have I usually write in silence. The thing that I've been using a lot lately is do you use Spotify or anything like that?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I found a Tibetan singing bowls playlist, and it's just weird because it's almost like having wind chimes. I have some really good speakers upstairs, and so it's always just like boom. It's not songs. It's just these sounds.
Yeah. No,
and And I've turned so many people on. They're like, I'm so much more productive right now that I have just these on in the background because it's, they're sort of, they're just amazing. It's super peaceful. I actually
Yeah.
listen to them when I ride my motorcycle. I have these headphones that I'm using right now. They're molded to my ears, and they have like, yeah, they're on stage monitors for musicians. So they're like
Wow.
really good, high quality. And it's good to have earplugs in when you're driving too fast. But that's usually what I'm listening to. Is just
Really?
these, boom, these little,
Yeah.
because it
These
just keeps me
tones.
like, yeah, like really centered.
Yeah.
And I love it when I'm writing and cleaning. It just kind of has, um, it's like a clearing and centering effect to it. So it's a good thing to have on when you're just kind of doing chores or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna. I wrote it down. I'm gonna check that
Yeah,
out.
Tibetan singing bowls, and it's pretty special. The final thing, so like I always talk about like the big three with people, and what's your big three? So mine is movement, music, and food. We've talked about your music. What are the other two things or the big three things in your life that kind of keep you just it could be principles, it could be things you could talk about forever, it could be the thing that if you were on a desert island, these would be the things that you would seek the most. What would be your big three?
Well, like I said, I love music. You know,
Mm.
I spent so much time. Like I said, I left home when I was 17. I joined the army, and I had family units. People that I was close to in the
Mm.
job that I've held. Whether it was in the Army or the Air Marshal Service or whatever. But coming back home after I retired, I realized what I've been missing out on for so long. So
Mm.
right now, my family is what centers me. I've got
Yeah.
two nephews who are 5 and 8 that live across the street from me, and I'm getting them introduced to the things that I love,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they're huge Kiss fans now, so they can't get enough Kiss. You know,
Albums? Do they get the albums and look at the album covers and stuff like that?
Well, it's kind of funny because we went into this place. It was kind of like it's an equipment rental place, but there's
Okay.
all these old antiques in there,
Yeah.
and they have all these old action figures and stuff setting up,
Oh yeah.
and they went crazy in that place looking. And the first thing my youngest nephew saw, he was like, "Oh, Kiss!" And I'm thinking that he's seeing some Kiss action figures because I haven't seen everything that this guy's got set up in these little cabinets.
Hmm.
Well, he's like, Uncle Gary, come over here and look at this. So I go over and look. Well, it's not action figures. It's a Playboy magazine, and it has Gene Simmons on the cover.
Yeah.
And you've got these very scantily clad women who are also in the Kiss
Yeah.
makeup.
Yeah.
He's got his arm around them and his tongue out, and I was like, oh, okay, let's move along. Let's see what else we can
Yeah.
find. So,
Yeah.
but they love Kiss music, and every time they get in my truck with me and we're gonna go do whatever, like, can we listen to Kiss? I'm like, absolutely. So family is really important to me, and the other thing I think for me is just I love reading.
Yeah.
I love reading. I got books all over the place in here, and
What are
I'll
you
read
reading right now,
anything.
or what are some of your favorite books?
Some of my favorite books.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my favorite book of all time is Stephen Pressfield's Gates of Fire.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever read it or not, but
No.
it's a historical fiction novel, and it's about the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And man, the way this guy tells a story and paints this picture, and it's about family and the kinship that you share with people that you serve in combat with. And it's an amazing, amazing book. I've read that book so many times. I had a copy that was literally held together with duct tape.
Mm.
And my son, who's in the Army, was getting ready to go to Ranger School, and I let him. He's like, Dad, I want to read something to get my head in the right place, to motivate me. And I'm like, read this. So it's kind of funny because I reached out to Stephen Pressfield just on Instagram. I follow him on Instagram, and I told him that story and about my son, wanting something to read, and I turned him on to the Gates of Fire book. And he goes, oh, that's fantastic. What's your son's name? And I told him. He's like, what's your address? And I gave him my address. I get a package in the mail from Stephen Pressfield, and it's a signed copy of Gates of Fire for me to give to my son. So, I don't, if Stephen Pressfield listens to this, I want him to know exactly how much I really appreciate that. But I
Yeah.
think that's the other thing is reading. I love historical fiction. I love history in general.
Hmm.
Within just every Jack Carr, I really got into reading Jack Carr novels. He writes his
Hmm.
novels with his character James Reese, who's a former Navy SEAL. I get into different phases where I want to read those kind of action thrillers, and then I just want to read some history, and then I want to read something completely, like science fiction, like The Martian, Andy Weir, The Martian. Love that book. So, I think those are my three things: music, reading, and family.
I love that you reached out. I'm trying to let people understand the importance of reaching out to the artists that you support,
Sure.
because they might do something like that. I mean, I have a really cool life because of, I think, reaching out to people. Like, I have friends of mine, like they're people that are actually friends of mine, and it all started with being a fan, and then I just send them an email, and then
Yeah,
poof, you know what I mean? And then
it's amazing how that works. Yeah.
yeah, and since we are in a world where it's like art and all this stuff is kind of white noise. You know what I mean? It's like we're just bombarded with it. So it's kind of nice to know that people are. I mean, I'm not talking about pop stars. I'm talking about
Right.
authors and musicians and these people that are relatively obscure, but they might have huge fan bases, but they kind of don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They like, I mean, they see the numbers, but as an artist, you're not engaging with your fans that much, and so sometimes to get someone reaching out to you and saying how much they appreciate it.
Yeah, like with my books and stuff, I'm a blip on the radar when when it comes to people knowing who I am and what it is I'm writing about. But still, I've got an Instagram and a Facebook page and all this stuff, and I get 5 likes on something, and one person comments and was like, "Man, I read that book and it really changed the way I look at things." Then to me, that means the world. So. And it's like, with the guy who wrote the foreword in the first book, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, he wrote a book that's very highly touted in the military called On Killing. And then he wrote a follow-up more specifically for law enforcement called On Combat.
Yeah.
And, in the Federal Air Marshal Service, we had copies of that book. It was kind of like on the mandatory reading list. And I ran into him at a trade show in Dallas, Texas. I just recognized him in the hallway, and I stopped him and told him how much that work meant to me, and how it changed the way I do my job and the way I look at my career as a Federal Air Marshal. And we had a conversation in the hallway. He gave me his card, and said, "Hey, man, if anything I can ever do, you contact me and let me know." Years later, I'm thinking about this book, and I've got a rough draft, and I'm thinking, man, I'd really like to have somebody with a big name write a forward for this to kind of draw attention. And I emailed him, and he was like, "Send it to me, man. I'd love to do it." So, Dave Grossman wrote the forward for the first book. And if it hadn't been for me just reaching out to some dude I had a conversation with in the hallway, and establishing that connection, it would have never happened. So,
yeah. Well, man, that was more than I could have ever asked. And I would, God, I could sit here and yammer on about ridiculous stories of,
I got a lot of them.
I'm blown away at the I love the way that you communicate situational awareness, and I'm stoked that we have more people out there that aren't doing it from a. I mean, even I feel that this is a thing that even when I've been talking to cops, I've been talking to a lot of police. I mean, actually, right before I called you, I just got another message from one, and it used to break my heart when the cops are being militarized, and I'd have to explain to them that they're not in the military. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, you're not. Like, we were talking about that earlier on how it's like, I was explaining to these police officers that a Navy SEAL's job is way easier than their job, because a Navy SEAL can kill you, and you guys aren't supposed to kill, and how do those stresses break you down? And you have a great voice, so I'm going to put links up to your book, and people need to follow you. People need to reach out to you because, you're rad. And where can we get it now? It's YMAA, right?
Yeah, YMAA Publications is the one that's publishing the book. It's going to be a 4-book series, and we're talking about a 5th book. But like I said, the first one is Spotting Danger Before It Spots You. It's just kind of the basics of situational awareness for common folks. Then there's Spotting Danger Before It Spots Your Kids. That one comes out. The ebook is May the 1st, and then June the 1st is the hard copy of the book comes out, and that's for teaching your kids about situational awareness, but not saying, "Hey, we're going to sit down and we're going to have a conversation about situational awareness." You teach them that, you give them the tools and the skills they need to develop situational awareness through simple games and things like that. And these little exercises that you can do with them to kind of set that foundation. Then the third book, the one I'm finishing up now, Spotting Danger Before It Spots Your Teen, is the one that's going to build on that foundation so that you can raise a responsibly independent teen and turn them loose in the world without losing sleep at night, wondering what's happening to them, knowing that they can take care of themselves and avoid danger if they run across it.
It's funny. I've been teaching that work for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And I'm doing all these courses on that. And when I talked to you about that, I was like, God, this guy's in my head. And so I would really love to be able to, cross promote what you're doing, because it's good to have it in the written form. And I have tons of exercises, and it'd be great to see the things that you're putting out too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I got the links and the stuff that you sent me and the stuff that, I was looking at your site and all the videos, and man, it's incredible. Like I said, I want to dive deeper into that too. So,
yeah. There's a lot of, I approach it from the personal perspective. Like, sure. I approach it from, at first, know thyself, right? Because, when you know who you are, and then it's a little bit easier to, because, if I'm still walking with the insecurities, but it's like, my father told me a long time ago, it's like, when he was in Vietnam, it's like, they were there, the special forces guys were there when there wasn't combat. He's like, but there was still that undertone. And he's like, if you're walking around like you have the upper hand on people, or that you're checking everyone out with that hypervigilance, they're just going to kill you. He's like, you have to know yourself well enough to know that, like, these people aren't your enemy. You have to know yourself well enough to create allies. You have to know yourself well enough to know when you are the anomaly, to accept that.
Right. Yeah, and I talk about that a lot in my book, like just erasing any preconceived notions you have about what danger is.
Yeah.
Or preconceived notions about what you're capable of, because a lot of people have this overinflated sense of self that gives them a little too much confidence when they're out in the world. You got to learn how to balance that. So those preconceived notions, and in that book that's coming out in June, the Spotting Danger Before It Spots Your Kids, I'm a really big advocate of not teaching fear. So, and that whole stranger danger thing, I don't agree with it whatsoever, because not all strangers are dangerous. And your kid may very well find themselves in a situation one day where they have to depend on a stranger for help. The trick is, and that happened to me one time, we were running a 5K race. My son's 12 years old. He wants to run a 5K. So we do the Susan J. Komen in North Las Vegas. And in this massive crowd, we get separated. And it just happened in a split second, and he was gone. Yeah. And I didn't know what to do. I yelled his name. I did all the things that I thought I should do. And I see some police officers. I know they've got radios. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go identify my kid, and we're going to start kind of casting this net out to find my kid. But he was working towards saving himself. So what his mother had always taught him was, if you're lost and you need somebody to help you, look for a mother, look for someone that looked like a mother. They had their own children. So he did. He found this lady, and she was going to help him. And they're walking up to the announcer stand when I see him, because he's got, red hair. He's easy to spot once he gets elevated, because he wasn't that tall back then. But, the whole situation only lasted a minute and a half, 2 minutes at the most. Yeah. Yeah. But the level of panic I was feeling was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Yeah. And but we were both working towards the same goal. When we got separated, we were both working towards the same goal and making sure that he was safe and that we were reconnected. He was doing one thing, I was doing another, but we were both trying to accomplish the same thing. And that's the trick. If you can get a family to where everybody understands what the overarching goal is, safety and security of the family, of the individual, of the people that you care about, then, when you're all working towards that same goal, it's a whole lot easier for everybody to get together and talk about these types of things without it seeming like you're just trying to shove this information down their throat.
That reminds me of this moment that I was walking down the street when I was a kid. I was probably 17, 16. And I thought someone was following me. And so I just noticed it, and so I just bumped into a liquor store. I saw the first lit up door that I saw, and everything's closed, so it was a liquor store. So I just go in, and the guy's script is to be like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be in here. You're a kid," and I was aware enough to know that I got to break him out of that really fast to talk to me. So I just looked up, I saw a name tag. So I just called him by his name and said, hey, Steve, I think someone's following me. Can I just tuck down in here for a second? And he
Yeah.
was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he literally said, yeah, come back. You can go in the back room. There's a bathroom in there, and he was totally helpful.
Yeah.
But if I'd have been like trying to explain it's like, no, I just saw it. I saw his name. I said his name. And
Yeah.
he was like, why does this kid know my name? Because that's his script. He just probably puts that name tag's probably been on that same shirt for
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah. It's like bright underneath it, but the rest of the shirt's faded. But just imagine if you as a child had been raised to be afraid of all strangers.
Right.
Now you've got a person following you and you're afraid to duck in there because you don't know these people. You don't know who's on the other side of that door.
Well, the other thing is when a stranger does walk in the room, and like my students, when I would see them head down, when someone walks in and they head down, you literally just look like a victim right now. If I'm gonna choose someone to mess with, it's you.
Yeah. Body language has a huge role to play when it comes to the way predators select their victim. Ted Bundy said he could select his next victim by the tilt of her head.
Yeah.
And they do it like that, and it's all through body language. And I address that in the book, like how to correct those problems so that you don't look like so much of a target.
Yeah. Ted Bundy was caught in my hometown.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
I had a ex-girlfriend who, like, her aunt or whatever got picked up by him in his Volkswagen Beetle and was like, this guy's creeping me out, and like took off.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We got to talk some more, man. You got a lot of
I'm telling you, man. Like we run in some similar things. Just I never joined any military because I'm the worst at any team activity.
Yeah.
I'm not made for it. But my heart always goes out to people that it's like punch through the other side and are actually sharing, because a lot of these skills, it's like I'm doing a thing on nonviolent communication, but it annoys me that people use that term because it's the idea with self-defense. Like, you want to be capable not to defend yourself. You want to be capable because you might have to build a fence or help a friend, and there's nothing worse than being in a room full of capable people. And I always say, or like sitting around a table with your friends in college and you're the only one that doesn't have scars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You're just lame. You know what I mean? It's like, you got nothing. And so there's this piece of it where nonviolent communication, I was like, I don't like that word because it makes people assume that they don't need to tap into this type of communication until there's the potential for violence. And it's like, no, good communication and seeing the other person's point of view should, we throw these words around all the time, but do we actually practice them?
Yeah.
It's like, because if now there's potential for violence between you and I, there's a huge breakdown of communication. Like, many choices have been made. So now we have to undo many bad choices or many choices towards violence. But if we just knew how to communicate openly and with, seeing without judgments and, like empathetically, then the potential for violence so it shouldn't be nonviolent communication. It should just be communication.
Right. And there's a whole piece, about, when it comes to situational awareness, about the de-escalation part, which requires, communication with the other person. And when it comes to like a violent encounter, you've only got so many options. You can spot it ahead of time and you can avoid it altogether. You can kind of get caught up in it and escape it.
Yeah.
If avoidance or escape are impossible, then you've got two other options. You've got de-escalation and you've got confrontation. You don't want it to get to confrontation. So those communication skills become incredibly important. And I worked in a prison for, 7 years, and you learn really quick that when you're locked in a housing unit with 129 inmates and it's just you and that outside door is locked, you're not walking out, then your communication skills have to be on point. And I had an old mentor back then, a guy named Dave Chin, great guy. He used to tell me all the time, he's like, the only reason you walk out that door at night is because they let you. If they wanted to stop you, they would. But because you can be, a genuine person and be empathetic and communicate, you're much, less likely to find yourself in those dangerous situations. So,
yeah. I mean, this conversation should go on a real long time, but I'm excited. Our mutual friend Gene Ching, he was like, you have to meet, because I'm pretty good buddies with Gene and we've spent a lot of time together. He's like, you gotta meet Gary. Like the second, it's like he was just like, you gotta meet Gary. You and Gary, all the stupid stories and that I have, and he's just like, oh yeah, you got to meet this guy, and he knows when I'm pumping, anytime anyone's like, I want to learn this, I'm like, you need to just understand how to make choices, get emotional intelligence, and get your awareness straight, and then after that, go work out because it's good for you. But
yeah, absolutely.
Like, stop trying to train to beat up some person. Yeah. Like, please stop that. Like,
just try to change the way people look at you. You know? And people look at you differently when you know how to communicate, and when you look like, you can take care of your own business. You handle yourself. And it changes the way you walk. It changes the way you interact with other people, and it changes the way predators look at you. And at some point they're going to be like, well, I'm just going to pass this person on to go to this much weaker person that looks timid and unable to, to defend themselves.
Yeah, I was putting in a washer and dryer. Like, now that I'm 40, I'll be 45 tomorrow, actually. Yeah, I'll be 45 tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So now I'm officially, a middle-aged man. Yeah, I can start saying years young. You know what I mean? But I was up on the ladder. I was bringing a ladder, and it was about to start to rain. So I was kind of in that. I had to drill a hole into the side of the building in order to get a new vent for my new dryer, right? Which is a big deal when you're in your 40s. Like, a new front loader and a washing dryer is.
It's a big step, man.
I love it. I've never been. And
congratulations.
Yeah. So, but it's night, and there's a lot of homeless around here, and I'm walking. I got the ladder. I got my drill. I got my headlamp on, and I'm about to climb up. And I got my whole thing, and then all of a sudden a guy comes around this side, and I can see he's got like something in his hand, like a weapon or something. And then another guy comes up behind me, and I was just like, "Oh, hey guys, I'm Matt. You guys new here? Did you guys move?" I just kind of introduced myself, and I was like, "What's your name?" And he's like, this one guy introduced himself, and this other guy goes, "Don't worry about it. I don't stay here." And I was like, "Well, anyways," I go, "What's your buddy's name?" And then the other guy, and then I was like, "Well, anyways, I'm climbing up here. You guys need this space." And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Okay." And I go, "Is that a gun in your hand?" And he goes, "No, it's not a gun." I go, "That just freaked me out. Oh my God." I go, "Man." And, and I just kind of was goofing off with them. Next thing you know, they're holding the ladder for me.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, just instantly, just rapid firing questions, show interest, see how they can contribute. Like there was never a moment where I'm like, there was never a moment where I did that. I was just kind of like, "Is that a gun in your hand?" Oh man, that just freaked me out for a second. I was like, and I was like, I thought I was about to get shot for the $3 in my pocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
and then
it helps to have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And so, I always told my kids, be kind, be cordial to the people you meet. Be as nice as you can possibly be.
Yeah.
Until it's time to not be nice. And you'll know when that is. People will give you indicators when it's time to not be nice, and you listen to that. And you react upon it. But don't be standoffish, or like you were saying, be hyper vigilant. I'm the guy that's going to stop all this bad stuff from happening.
Yeah,
you don't have to, because it just makes you more of a target.
What do you got going on today?
Well, actually, my brother, he runs a local body shop. And he's the one that's got the farm that butts up against mine. He just finished ripping out a bunch of fence lines. So as soon as he gets off work, I'm going to run over to the field with him, and we're going to drive some fence posts.
That is the reality of owning land.
Yeah, man. It's yeah. And you work your ass off from the time, you get outside in the morning until it's time to sit down in the afternoon with a cup of coffee and kind of look at what you've accomplished. And that's kind of how I'm living my whole life now. I'm just going to do as much as I can in the time that I've got. And at the end of the day, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to enjoy a cup of coffee and admire my work.
Thank you for watching that. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was Gary. I love this guy. And again, you can download it, take a course from me, buy his book, go to ymaa.com. And this also supports the great Gene Ching and his community. You purchasing my Situational Mindfulness course supports my community. Buying this book, buy it as a gift. Great gifts. Books are great gifts. All right, see you guys. This is Total BS Wellness. Get a premium membership. Man, we're doing lots of stuff over here.